The sky above the Zorath system burned red as the last of their defense ships fell silent. Plasma fire streaked across the void, broken hulls drifted like ghosts, and the once proud Zorath fleet was now nothing more than debris scattered among dying stars. Commander Valar stood on the bridge of his crippled cruiser, his scaled hands trembling as he looked at the flickering holographic map. Every sector blinked red, every ship lost connection, and every hope seemed gone. "Sir, the Draven are breaching the inner orbit," shouted the communication officer, his voice filled with fear. Valar's eyes hardened. "Activate the distress beacon now," he ordered. "But Commander," the officer hesitated, "that signal hasn't been used for centuries." "Do it," Valar snapped. "Someone must hear us, someone must answer." The beacon activated with a low hum, sending a golden pulse across the darkness. It was a desperate cry, one that echoed across the stars. Passing through ancient relay stations and forgotten sectors, Valar watched the signal vanish into the unknown, his hope fading with it. He knew no one would come, not after what they had done to the humans long ago. The Draven swarm closed in, monstrous bioships that looked alive, their dark carapaces glowing with violet energy. They moved like predators smelling blood, consuming everything in their path. The Zorath had underestimated them, and now they were paying the price. Valar clenched his jaw. "If this is the end, let it be remembered that we fought," he whispered. Hours passed and silence filled the command deck. The beacon kept transmitting, its faint pulse repeating the same message. "Zorath fleet requesting reinforcement. Any allied species, please respond." But the galactic channels remained empty. Every ally had turned away, afraid of facing the Draven. Valar's heart sank. His people were doomed. He thought of his homeworld, the crystal oceans, the glowing forests, the cities now likely burning under the swarm's attack. He closed his eyes and whispered a prayer to the stars. "Forgive us for thinking we were untouchable." Then, just as despair settled in, something strange happened. A faint static interrupted the silence. The communication officer blinked. "Sir, I think we're getting a signal." Valar frowned. "From where?" "Unknown source," the officer said, adjusting the frequency. It's not from the Alliance. The code looks ancient." The static grew louder, and then a voice, calm, deep, unmistakably different. "Message received," it said. Valar froze. "Who is this?" The voice continued. "Reinforcements en route." The transmission ended. The entire bridge went silent, every officer looking at each other in disbelief. "Was that human?" one of them whispered. Valar's eyes widened. "Impossible," he muttered. Humans were gone, erased from galactic records hundreds of years ago after the Great Exodus. No colony had survived, no ship had returned, and no one had heard a human voice since. The communication officer stuttered. "Sir, should we respond?" Valar nodded slowly. "Yes. Reply immediately." They tried to send a message, but the signal bounced back. Whoever sent it had vanished, leaving only static behind. The crew murmured in confusion and fear. Some thought it was a ghost transmission, a trick from the Draven. Others whispered that humanity had always promised to return one day. Valar didn't know what to believe, but something deep inside him, a flicker of ancient guilt, told him it was real. The Zorath had betrayed humanity once. They had turned away during Earth's darkest hour, and now, centuries later, as the Zorath begged for help, it was humanity that answered. Valar felt the weight of that truth crushing his chest. The Draven swarm was now visible through the observation window, a sea of living nightmares closing in. Their biocannons glowed like miniature suns, preparing for the final strike. Valar gripped the edge of his command table. "Even if no one comes," he said softly, "we will fight to the last." But then the sensors began to flicker again. A low vibration ran through the ship's hull. "Sir?" shouted an officer. Unidentified warp signatures, and multiple, approaching fast. Valar's head snapped up. "From where?" The officer's eyes widened. "From Sol Sector." Valar's breath caught, his voice a whisper. "That's Earth." The bridge filled with blinding light as the first signature breached the system. Through the viewing screen, something massive emerged from hyperspace. A black warship, sleek and terrifying, unlike anything the Zorath had ever built, and then another and another, until the dark sky filled with shadows of colossal vessels. Each bore the same symbol, a blue planet encircled by wings of steel. Valar's trembling voice broke the silence. Humans! The officer stared in awe. They came. The flagship opened a communication line, and once again, that calm human voice echoed through the speakers. "This is Admiral Kieran of the Terran Vanguard," it said. "Zorath distress signal received. Stand by for assistance." Valar could not speak. The bridge crew was frozen. Disbelief, fear, and hope all at once. Humanity had vanished from history, but now, they returned not as wanderers or refugees. They returned as warriors. The light from their fleet bathed the dying system in silver fire, and for the first time in generations, Commander Valar allowed himself to hope again. Across the stars, the ancient beacon flickered once more before shutting down. Its final signal carried a single message into the void. "The humans have answered." The first human ship drifted through the darkness like a silent god of war. It was vast, black as night, and covered with glowing silver lines that pulsed like veins of energy. Every Zorath officer on the bridge stared in disbelief, their eyes wide, their hearts pounding. Commander Valar could not look away. The human ship was not alone. More vessels emerged from hyperspace one after another. Carriers, dreadnoughts, escort destroyers, and something far larger than anything ever built by any known species. The air on the Zorath command deck grew heavy. The scale of the Terran fleet was beyond comprehension. "Commander," whispered the sensor officer, "I am reading hundreds of warp signatures. All human." Valar's throat went dry. "Hundreds?" "Yes, sir," the officer replied, "and they are not using any known galactic drive. Their technology is unidentifiable." The largest of the ships moved into formation. It was massive, its hull marked with a name, TSS Invictus. Beneath that name, the ancient Terran emblem glowed bright, the blue earth surrounded by twin silver wings. Valar whispered, "So it is true. The humans never died." Then the voice returned through the communication line, calm and commanding. "This is Admiral Kieran of the Terran Vanguard," it said. "Commander Valar, we acknowledge your distress call. Prepare to coordinate defense." Valar's voice shook as he replied, "Admiral, we didn't think anyone would come." Kieran's tone was cold but steady. "We don't forget those who cry for help, Commander. Even if the galaxy forgot us." The words hit Valar like a blade. The old guilt of his ancestors burned inside him. The Zorath had abandoned Earth during the Great Collapse, refusing to aid them when humanity's colonies were attacked. Now the same humans they betrayed had returned. "Stronger than ever, Admiral," Valar managed to say. "The Draven Swarm controls 3 sectors. Their numbers are beyond anything we can count," Kieran answered without hesitation. "Then we will even the odds." The human fleet began to move. Thousands of engines ignited in perfect synchronization, lighting up the void with blue fire. They formed a battle line so precise that even the Zorath officers gasped. It was not chaos, not fear, it was discipline. Every ship moved with purpose, every signal perfectly timed, every weapon armed as if the fleet shared one mind. Then the Terran dreadnoughts deployed something the Zorath had never seen. From the underbellies of the ships, hundreds of black metallic orbs detached, floating silently into formation. "Sir, new objects detected," the sensor officer said, his voice trembling. "What are they?" Valar asked. Before anyone could answer, the orbs unfolded like flowers of death. Each one revealed glowing weapon arrays and began scanning the system. "They're drones," said the human admiral's voice over the channel. "Autonomous sentinels linked to the fleet's combat AI. Project Aegis," Valar blinked. "Autonomous?" "Yes," Kieran replied. "They don't miss," and for a brief moment, everything was still. Then the space around them trembled. Dozens of Draven hive ships appeared out of hyperspace. Dark, monstrous living things that screamed through the vacuum. The Zorath bridge shook as enemy weapons powered up. "Enemy fleet incoming," shouted the tactical officer. Valar turned to his crew. "All power to shields, return fire." Before they could fire, the Terran ships moved first. Human destroyers surged forward like hunting wolves, their plasma batteries cutting through Draven ships with impossible precision. The drones joined in, firing beams of concentrated energy that sliced through enemy armor like paper. The void became a storm of light. The Zorath fleet watched in awe. The humans were not fighting for survival. "They were dominating by the stars," whispered one of Valar's lieutenants. "They fight like they've done this 1,000 times," Valar nodded slowly. "No, they fight like they were born for this." The TSS Invictus fired its main cannon. A single beam of blue energy erupted. piercing through the Draven command vessel, tearing it in half. The explosion lit the entire sector, and the shockwave rippled through space like thunder. Even the Draven swarm paused, their movements disoriented. The humans didn't hesitate. They pressed the attack harder, pushing the enemy back. "Admiral Kieran," Valor said over the comms, "your firepower. It's beyond anything we've seen. How did you—" Kieran interrupted calmly. "We evolved while the galaxy slept. Commander?" There was silence for a moment, then the Admiral added, "And we remember who turned away when humanity begged for help." Valor's eyes lowered, shame mixing with awe. The humans were not gods, but they carried a presence that felt divine. Their technology, their unity, their silence. Everything about them radiated power and restraint. No arrogance, no boasting, only purpose. As the last wave of Draven ships retreated into deep space, the battlefield fell quiet, debris floated like dust, and the Terran fleet slowly regrouped. Valar exhaled. They saved us," he whispered. His officer replied softly, "No, Commander. They saved everyone." The communication line flickered again. "This system is secure," Admiral Kieran said, "but this war isn't over. Prepare your fleet to follow us to Sector 9. That's where the swarm's nest lies." Valar blinked. "Admiral, we are in no condition to—" Kieran's tone stayed firm. "Then stay behind, but humanity is moving forward." The signal ended, and the humans began recharging their warp drives. Valar watched the vast Terran armada align once more, their formation sharp and unbroken for centuries. The galaxy believed humanity was lost, weak and forgotten, but now as the stars burned with blue fire, Valar realized the terrifying truth. Humanity had never vanished, they had only been waiting, and when the galaxy called for help, they returned not as victims but as vengeance. The stars above the Zorath system shimmered faintly as the Terran fleet regrouped. Their hulls glowed in the dying light of battle, their engines humming like the pulse of a sleeping giant. Commander Valar watched from his bridge. All written across his scaled face, he had seen countless battles, countless defeats, but never anything like this. The humans had arrived out of nowhere and turned despair into victory. Yet even after such destruction, they looked calm, silent, efficient. No celebration, no shouts, no cheers, only quiet preparation. As if this battle was only the beginning, not the end. "Admiral Kieran," Valar called through the channel. "Your fleet has saved my people. I owe you everything." Kieran's voice came back, steady as steel. "Don't thank us yet, Commander." "The swarm isn't done," Valar frowned. "What do you mean?" "Scanners show Draven reinforcement signals in the next sector," Kieran replied. "And they're bringing something much larger." The Zorath crew exchanged terrified glances. Valar whispered, "Larger than this swarm?" "Yes," Kieran said. "Their command hive. The core that controls them all." A pause followed, then the human admiral added, "We're going to destroy it." Valar's second officer blinked in disbelief. "Destroy the Draven command hive? That's suicide." But Kieran's tone didn't change. "It's necessary." The transmission cut, leaving the Zorath stunned moments later. The human fleet moved again, their ships aligned perfectly, every formation synchronized as though guided by a single unseen hand. Then from the massive flagship Invictus, a strange pulse of blue light rippled outward. Valar turned to his officers. "What are they doing?" "Sir," said the sensor officer, his eyes wide. "The humans are generating a singularity field. I've never seen energy levels like this." Valar's heart pounded. "A singularity? That's a black hole weapon." But before anyone could panic, Admiral Kieran's voice returned. "This is Project Prometheus," he said. "A controlled stellar ignition system, created for one purpose, to end swarms." Valar felt cold. "You mean they can ignite stars?" Kieran's answer was calm. "Under the right conditions. Yes." The Zorath bridge went silent. Every officer looked at each other in horror and awe. Humanity had not just built ships. They had mastered power itself. Power that could bend suns to their will. Then it began, from the Terran fleet. Thousands of drone units detached and flew into formation, surrounding the dying Zorath sun. They formed a glowing ring, linking together through invisible energy threads. The humans were manipulating the star itself, feeding it energy until it began to roar. Valar shouted, "Admiral, you'll destroy the whole system." But Kieran replied simply, "Only if we fail." Outside, space trembled. The star brightened, its surface boiling with waves of fire. Draven ships emerged from hyperspace just as the solar storm peaked. Their grotesque forms screamed through the void. Their weapons charging, but the Terran fleet didn't move. They held position, waiting, watching, calculating, then the voice came again, this time from a human AI system. It spoke in a tone both mechanical and alive. Prometheus cycle complete, ignition in 3, 2, 1, a flash of light consumed everything. For a second, the Zorath crew thought they were dead. The screen filled with white fire as the star unleashed a pulse of controlled energy. The Draven fleet was caught in the wave. Their organic hulls vaporized in an instant. Entire armadas disappeared in silence. The Zorath ship shook violently. Alarms blaring, Valar shouted, "Hold position!" Outside, the chaos turned to silence again. When the light faded, the entire sector was empty. The swarm gone. The space calm, only the human ships remained unharmed. Their energy shields glowing faintly blue. Valar fell back in his chair, breathing hard. They used a star as a weapon, he whispered. His officer nodded slowly, his voice trembling. No, they used it like a tool. Then the communication line reopened. Admiral Kieran appeared on the main screen. His face was stern, marked by old scars and calm eyes. Sector secure, he said. The Draven hive will feel that loss. But this is only the beginning. Valar stood and bowed his head. Admiral, how did humanity become this strong? Kieran looked at him for a long moment before replying. When the galaxy abandoned us, we had only two choices, die or evolve, Valar said softly. And you evolved. Kieran nodded. We built our strength in silence, our weapons in exile, our unity in pain. He turned his gaze toward the distant stars. And now, when others beg for mercy, humanity brings balance. The communication faded once again, leaving the Zorath bridge bathed in quiet awe. Outside, the Terran fleet drifted like metallic titans, the light of the reborn star reflecting off their hulls. Valar whispered to himself. They became legends, while we became comfortable at that moment. The surviving Zorath officers realized something. Humanity wasn't back to seek revenge or power. They had come because they refused to let the galaxy fall the same way Earth once did. As the fleet began to move toward the next sector, Valar watched the Invictus lead the formation, a silent shadow among the stars. He knew this was only the surface of what the humans could do. Whatever other weapons or secrets they carried, the galaxy wasn't ready for them. For the first time in thousands of years, the universe feared humanity again. Not because of their brutality, but because of their will. They had conquered extinction, and now they commanded the stars themselves. And as the Terran fleet disappeared into hyperspace, leaving trails of blue light across the void, Valar whispered, "May the stars protect whoever stands in their way." The Terran fleet drifted through the aftermath of the battle. Wreckage from the Draven swarm floated in endless silence, glowing faintly with the light of the nearby star. Inside the TSS Invictus, Admiral Kieran stood alone at the viewport, watching fragments of burned enemy ships drift like dust. His face was calm, but his eyes carried the weight of 1,000 years of exile. "Admiral," said his second-in-command, Commander Vale stepping forward quietly. "All systems stable, but we lost the Resolute, Orion, and 77 drone units." Kieran didn't turn, his voice low and steady. 77 drones are nothing. "Vale, but every crew we lose, that's a century of discipline gone." He paused, watching the distant sun flare one last time. "Have the Zorath fleet regrouped?" "Yes, sir," Vale replied. "They're holding position. Waiting for orders." Kieran nodded. "Then let them wait. They need to understand what comes next." On the Zorath command ship, silence hung like a heavy fog. Commander Valar sat in his chair, staring at the sensor feed of the human fleet. His officers whispered quietly, their voices filled with confusion and awe. "Commander," said his communication officer, "why do they fight so hard for us?" "We abandoned them once." Valar didn't answer immediately, his mind replaying the human admiral's words. "We don't forget those who cry for help. Finally." He spoke, his tone heavy. "Maybe they fight not for us, but for something greater. Something we forgot long ago." A sudden alarm interrupted the silence. "Sir, multiple warp signatures detected. It's the Draven." Valar's blood ran cold. "How many?" "Too many to count." On the main screen, the darkness of space rippled, and a vast shadow appeared. The Draven Hive Command, a colossal living fortress larger than any fleet pulsing with energy. Valar shouted. "Admiral Kieran, the swarm is back." "Their hive is here." Static filled the line before the human's voice broke through. "Understood, Commander. Hold position." Valar hesitated. "Admiral, that thing could destroy us all." Kieran's tone was firm. "Then we make sure it dies first." The battle began before the Zorath could react. The Draven hive opened its maw, releasing swarms of smaller ships, organic creatures shaped like blades and serpents. They moved in waves, surrounding the Terran fleet like a living storm. The humans responded with precision, unleashing coordinated fire that turned the darkness into fire. But even the Terran fleet struggled under the onslaught. One of the smaller carriers exploded, sending debris scattering across the void. The shockwave rocked the Invictus, Vale shouted. "Shields holding at 70%. Kieran's eyes stayed locked on the tactical display. "Maintain formation. Do not break line." The Zorath ships joined the fight, their weapons firing desperately. But compared to the humans, their firepower was nothing. Valar could only watch as Terran ships fought like warriors born of light and steel. Still, even they were being pushed back. Then came the order no one expected. "Activate Project Aegis Protocol Omega," Kieran commanded. Vale turned sharply. "Sir, that will overload the fusion cores." "I know," Kieran replied quietly, "but if we don't, the hive will reach the core worlds." The command transmitted across the fleet, and one by one, several Terran ships broke formation. Their engines glowed brighter than ever before. Their cores overloading, Valar realized what they were about to do. "They're sacrificing themselves," he whispered. The overloaded ships accelerated directly into the swarm, their reactors screaming. A flash of white light tore across the battlefield, pure energy consuming everything in its path. The hive fortress was hit head-on, parts of its armor melting, its organic surface burning away. The swarm recoiled, thousands of their creatures disintegrating instantly. But the Terran ships were gone, vaporized in their final act inside the Invictus. Silence fell. The light faded, alarms quieted, and only the hum of the engines remained. Vale lowered his head. "They gave everything." "Admiral," Kieran's voice was steady but softer now. "That's the price of power." "Commander," he turned to the screen showing the hive drifting, burning but not destroyed. "And we're not done yet." On the Zorath ship, Valar and his crew stared at the fading explosion. One of his officers whispered, "They destroyed their own ships to protect us." Valar clenched his fists, his voice shaking. "They fight with purpose we can't even understand." He opened the channel to the Terran flagship. "Admiral Kieran, we are with you till the end." The reply came quickly. "Then prove it, Commander. Follow our lead." The remaining Terran fleet advanced, engines flaring with renewed power. Zorath ships followed behind them, battered but inspired together. They unleashed a coordinated strike, plasma and beam fire cutting through the hive's remaining defenses. The battlefield turned into a storm of energy and light. Finally, as the hive began to break apart, Kieran issued one final order. "All ships target the core. Fire everything." The Terran cannons fired in unison. A single massive explosion consumed the hive fortress. Its body cracked open, spilling burning fragments into the void. The swarm was over. The silence that followed was endless. Valar looked around at his crew, exhausted, speechless, alive. He whispered, "We are here because of them," his officer replied quietly. "No, Commander. We are here because of who they became." On the Invictus, Admiral Kieran stood watching the broken battlefield. His eyes heavy but proud. "Mark their names," he said softly. "Every ship, every soul. They earned their eternity," Vale saluted. "Yes, sir." And as the Terran fleet turned toward the next system, Kieran's voice echoed through the comms. "Remember this day?" The day humanity reminded the stars what it means to fight. The fleet faded into hyperspace, leaving behind only wreckage and silence. But to every survivor who watched them disappear, one truth became clear. Humanity's strength came not from their weapons, but from their will to pay any price for the light to keep shining. The war was over, but the silence that followed felt heavier than battle. Broken ships floated through the void, glowing faintly in the light of distant suns. The air aboard every surviving vessel was thick with exhaustion, grief and disbelief the galaxy had changed forever. Commander Valar stood at the viewport of his damaged cruiser. The stars looked different now, calmer, quieter, as if mourning the lives lost. His crew moved slowly, repairing systems. tending to the wounded, but their eyes were fixed on one direction, the Terran fleet. The humans were still there, motionless, floating like silent guardians. "Commander," said his communication officer softly. "The humans, they're sending a transmission." Valar straightened his uniform, his hands trembling slightly. "Patch it through." The screen flickered, revealing Admiral Kieran. His face was pale, his uniform burned. His voice calm but strained. "This is Admiral Kieran of the Terran Vanguard," he said. "The hive is gone, the swarm is scattered, and the stars are safe. For now." Valar bowed his head. "Admiral, you've saved more than just us. You've saved every species that feared extinction." Kieran shook his head slowly. "We didn't save you, Commander. We saved the memory of who we used to be." Valar frowned. "I don't understand." Kieran looked away, his eyes distant. "When humanity fell centuries ago, we swore never to beg again. We built our strength in the dark. We became the storm we once feared. And when the galaxy cried for help, we came not for revenge, but to make sure no one else had to face the silence we did." The words hung in the air, heavy and pure, for a long time. No one spoke, even Valar, the proud Zorath commander, felt something deep in his chest, shame, awe and respect all mixed together. The humans had every reason to turn away, yet they returned when others would have left them to die. "Admiral," Valar said finally, his voice breaking slightly, "how can we ever repay what you've done?" Kieran's eyes met his, calm and firm. "You don't, Commander, you remember?" Valar frowned. "Remember?" "Yes," Kieran replied. "When someone weaker asks for help, you don't turn away. That is the price of survival. The duty of strength." Moments later, the Terran fleet began to move one by one, their engines ignited. Glowing with soft blue light, they moved in perfect silence, aligning into departure formation. Valar's officer turned to him, confused. "Commander, they're leaving." Valar's eyes widened. "Leaving? But the war is over. Don't they wish to celebrate?" The officer shrugged. "It seems not." The Invictus turned toward the edge of the system. Valar opened a communication channel once more. "Admiral Kieran, wait. Where will you go?" For a moment only static answered. Then Kieran's voice came distant, almost like an echo. "There's always another cry in the dark. Commander, as long as there's someone who needs us, humanity will answer." The signal ended. The Terran fleet vanished into hyperspace, leaving behind a trail of silver light that shimmered across the stars. Valar stood there motionless, watching as the last trace of humanity disappeared. He whispered softly, "They came like ghosts, and left like legends." Days later, across the galaxy, stories began to spread. Tales of a fleet that answered when no one else did. Of ships that fought with the power of gods yet carried the hearts of men. Of voices from an ancient world called Earth, who returned when all hope was gone, on hundreds of planets. The phrase became a promise. When the humans come, the stars will be safe again. Children of alien worlds played with toy ships shaped like Terran dreadnoughts. Old soldiers spoke of blue fire and silver wings. And in every council, every meeting of great powers, one rule was spoken with respect. Never underestimate humanity. Valar returned to his home world weeks later. His people welcomed him as a hero, but he refused the title. He stood before the Grand Council and said, "We are alive because the ones we abandoned came back to save us." He looked up toward the stars and added softly, "And we will not forget." Far beyond the edges of the known galaxy, inside a nebula filled with the remnants of forgotten wars, the Terran fleet drifted silently, preparing once more. Their hulls gleamed with starlight, their banners unmarked inside the Invictus. Admiral Kieran stood before his crew, his voice steady. "Mission accomplished," he said. "But our work never ends." His second-in-command, Vale, smiled faintly. "The galaxy is already speaking your name, sir. They call us the fleet that saved the stars." Kieran turned his gaze to the endless horizon of space. "Names fade," he replied quietly, "but actions echo forever." He raised his hand, signaling the fleet. "All units prepare for deep space deployment. Set course for the next signal." Vale saluted. "Aye, Admiral. Destination?" Kieran's eyes softened. Wherever the light has gone out, the fleet engines roared to life. Dozens of Terran warships aligned, and with a single pulse of blue energy, they vanished once more into the cosmic dark, their legend growing with every jump, every rescue, every battle fought for those who could not fight for themselves. And somewhere in the silence between galaxies, a lone signal pulsed, a call for help. Weak but persistent, and once again humanity answered.